Welcome to another episode of Tea Time with Sunita. Today I have a guest with me, Scott Mozingo, who's an attorney with Highland Title. Scott and I go a long way, and I thought who would be better to answer some questions than Scott himself. He's a wealth of information. Title companies, settlement companies are a very big component of the buying process of any real estate property. And people do ask questions, so I thought who better could answer the questions than Scott himself. So Scott, tell us something about a settlement process.
All right, well, thank you, Sunita. So yes, we do go quite a ways back. I've been doing this 21 years now, I think, and known you for most of that, I think. So good to be here. Yeah, it's a good question. Settlement companies, a lot of people, when they come to buying a house or selling a house, they know what you do, right? You're going to drive them around, show them houses. They know what the lender does. They're going to be the one that actually lends them the money. But they don't really understand what it is that the title company is doing. And our process really doesn't start at the beginning where you do. It starts after you have that ratified contract. And once you get the ratified contract, then we start looking at, first thing we do is order the title work. Because our main job is really to make sure that the buyer is getting good title to the property. That buyer, they want to be able to enjoy the property without anybody saying that they have some other claim against the property. They also, that buyer eventually might sell the house, and they want to make sure they have good title to sell the house. And so our job is really to make sure that that's clear when they go to buy the house.
Scott, you've been talking about title insurance. Could you tell us something about, because people sometimes do not understand what title insurance is all about, because they look at this big amount in the settlement sheet and they wonder what this is for and do they really need it? So could you tell us a little bit about why title insurance is important and why should one get it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that goes really hand in hand with us doing the title search and making sure the title is clear. Also, the other component of a title company is selling title insurance. We really are an insurance company. And so there's going to be two title insurance fees that a normal buyer would see on a settlement statement. One is going to be a lender's policy. If they're getting a loan, if they're paying all cash, good news, they don't have to buy a lender's policy. But if they're getting a loan, they've got to buy lender's title insurance. That's the title insurance that covers the lender. It's required by the lender. They've got to buy it for the lender. The other one is owner's title insurance. Now, this one is optional. So it's up to them whether they want it. But state of Virginia wants us to offer this to them. This is the one that covers them in case there's ever any title problems on the property. And so at settlement, I try to go through that with the buyer and explain to them, kind of some of the risks involved. And I know, like you mentioned, you're going to see those title insurance fees on the settlement statement, and they are going to be a little bit bigger. Now, they are a percentage of sales price and loan amount. So the bigger the sales price, the more it's going to cost. But this is the coverage that protects them, not just for the time that they own the property, but even after they own the property. If anybody were to ever come back and say, hey, there's a title issue, they're still in the chain of title, they still are covered under that policy. And it covers them for any kind of outstanding judgments, liens, deeds of trust, anything that was either missed or released incorrectly at the courthouse, whether the bank didn't send the release, which is probably the most common title problem we run into, which is an unreleased trust with a previous seller. So it's going to cover them for all those things. Also, if they buy what's called the enhanced title insurance, they're covered for future problems as well. So future fraud, forgery at the courthouse, somebody were to steal their identity, go and record a new deed of trust or a new deed at the courthouse, they're covered under that policy.
What about the owner's policy? Is that something that you do recommend? Somebody, a buyer who's coming in, first-time buyers, they do not know anything about that, and they say, okay, the lender is being covered, what about us? So is there some benefit in a buyer buying an owner's policy?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the one, and that's the question I get a lot of times too. Well, if I'm buying a lender's policy, do I really need an owner's policy? So the lender's policy only covers the lender. So if there's ever a title problem, it's only the lender that has coverage under that policy, and it does nothing for the buyer. The owner's policy covers the buyer. They hire the attorney, they fight in court, and usually what I explain to people is by the time you talk to an attorney, have them write a letter, make a phone call, you've probably spent the equivalent of what you would spend in title insurance. And with buying the title insurance, it takes it all the way through. They hire all the attorneys, they go to court, they defend their rights. If there's a title issue, a lot of times the title policy, just having that title policy when you go to sell the property, clears up the title issue. We don't have to kind of do any more at that process other than work through the underwriters. So it really is a nice kind of, just peace of mind that they own the house. If anybody ever says they don't own the house, they have attorneys backing them up to protect them. And so with that title policy, it's underwritten through a national underwriter. Different title companies use different underwriters. And so that big national title company, they're going to step in, they're going to provide that coverage for the buyer.
Thank you, Scott. That's been a lot of wealth of information. And of course, we will deal with some other questions later on. But thank you so much for this information, and I'm sure it will be helpful for all the buyers out there. And for now, that's the tea.